A long time ago, I made this video, 8 times when NBA rebuilds go horribly wrong. And you know what's funny? Over 5 years later, and some of those exact same teams are still stuck in rebuilding hell. So I thought to myself, well, it's time to make a more modern version, but focus on players. Which players have been stuck on disturbingly mediocre teams for almost their entire careers? And how did they find themselves in this situation? Do they bear the blame for their team's lack of success? Or are they a victim of it? We're going to take a look at NBA players who've been in an endless cycle of rebuilding that they're desperately trying to claw out of.
A three-pointer! He's figured it out!
LaMelo Ball. The Charlotte Hornets have seemingly been in purgatory for over a decade. They haven't made the playoffs since the Kemba Walker, Al Jefferson era. So when they drafted LaMelo Ball with the 3rd overall pick, he was supposed to be the savior of the franchise. A 6'7" point guard with not just the skills, but the flair, the playstyle, and the name recognition to be the NBA's next superstar. He won Rookie of the Year and made the All-Star team in just his 2nd season. And most importantly, the Hornets had a winning record in his 2nd season. It made Hornets fans believe that this guy can finally take them back to the playoffs.
To the races, what do you got?
Unfortunately, that was the last time LaMelo sniffed any sort of success. Just like his older brother, LaMelo succumbed to the fate of several major injuries, many of which were recurring ankle problems, and basically the same problem Lonzo had. At first, the Hornets were not bothered. If LaMelo got injured and didn't play as many games, it means they get a higher draft pick to get somebody to run alongside him. The organization was rebuilding after all, and they knew this was a slow process, so by compiling a bunch of young players to complement LaMelo, something should click eventually, right? Well, here's the problem. LaMelo kept getting injured. After his All-Star year, he missed so many games for 3 straight seasons, and the Hornets kept losing. During those years, the perception of the Hornets was, they're a bad team without LaMelo, and if he were healthy, they'd be winning. Yet, the numbers don't support that argument. Since 2022, with LaMelo on the court, the Hornets still have a minus 5.14 net rating. In these past 3 seasons, LaMelo missed a lot of games, but when he did play, they still had a losing record. There is evidence that the team is better with LaMelo on the court, but there's no evidence they'd be a winning team with him anyway. Over the years, LaMelo's usage rate has been absurd, and he even led the league at one point with a 36% usage rate. But now, by 2026, the Hornets have realized perhaps LaMelo's playstyle and his history of injuries is not a combination they want to invest in a player, especially one who's supposed to be your franchise superstar. In theory, by drafting players like Brandon Miller and Con Knipple, 2 big wing players who can run and gun alongside him, it should be a recipe for success if LaMelo can transition into a pass-first point guard. But with the fewest minutes he's ever played and the looming trade rumors, perhaps the team believes he is the reason they've been stuck in rebuilding hell. Zach LaVine. In 12 seasons, with 3 different teams, Zach LaVine has only appeared in 4 playoff games. That was back in 2022. If there's any player whose box score numbers look a lot better than his actual game, LaVine is a great example of that. For a long time, he was putting up all-star caliber numbers with elite shooting efficiency, along with a flashy, exhilarating playstyle that captures the attention of fans. At a glance, it seemed like he'd be a great fit for any team who needs an extra scoring punch. So how does a player as talented as LaVine only make the playoffs 1 time? Well, basically, in his first 10 years with Minnesota and Chicago, both teams were in the early stages of rebuilding through his entire time there. In Minnesota, it was the post-Kevin Love era, where LaVine was their prized draft pick who flourished alongside Wiggins. Heck, there was even a time when fans preferred him over Wiggins due to his much better shooting ability. Yet, the fact remains. The LaVine and Wiggins experiment was a mere transition period, and neither of them exuded number 1 option energy. LaVine, being the more valuable of the 2 assets, was sent to Chicago, arriving to the Windy City at the start of yet another rebuild.
I think we're 2-20 against, some of the top teams, so I think we got to do a better job playing them.
For the Bulls, it was the end of the Jimmy Butler era, and LaVine was the major piece they got in return. You could call it bad luck to spend the first decade of your career on 2 teams that just started to rebuild. But you could also say both these teams had faith that LaVine could grow into something more. Yet, he couldn't. Beneath the surface of his extravagant shooting and flashy dunks was a man who simply did not care enough. When the Bulls gave LaVine a 5-year, $215 million deal in 2022, coincidentally, that was also the last year he made the All-Star team. Since then, LaVine has been coasting along. He still has his once-in-a-blue-moon outbursts, where he goes on a rampage that gives fans hope he could be that guy. In reality, however, 80% of the time, he phones it in and just does the bare minimum so his team doesn't get mad. So when the Sacramento Kings acquired him and somehow thought him and DeRozan could be better this time, they were wrong. Unlike LaVine's previous two teams, the Kings were not supposed to be rebuilding. They had plans of returning to the playoffs immediately with a talented roster, yet the arrival of LaVine introduced a massive burden on the team's payroll. He's making $48 million a year, the most of anyone on the roster. The only way to describe him now is apathy. LaVine doesn't care, and spends large parts of the season being completely invisible. You'd imagine a player like LaVine would start caring as his contract is coming to an end, at least put in more effort and earn another big payday, but even then, he doesn't care. To the fault of poor decision-making and bad trades by the front office, the Kings found themselves on the brink of pushing the reset button once again. And LaVine once again is stuck in rebuilding purgatory. This time, it's his own fault, but I guess it doesn't matter to a guy who does the bare minimum with no ambition to win. Colin Sexton. A few years ago, Draymond Green said something funny to Dylan Brooks. Quote, "The dynasty starts after you, not with you." It got me thinking, how many other players does this phrase apply to? Well, I immediately thought of Colin Sexton. As the 8th pick of the iconic 2018 class, Sexton got overlooked by much more renowned prospects. But he was still the 3rd best guard of the class, one of the most dynamic guards to ever come out of Alabama. He was actually ranked as the best high school point guard in the country, and he was perfectly equipped to become a superstar in the NBA. Everything you could ask for, his work ethic, his love for the game, his desire to be in the spotlight, and a level of maturity well beyond his years, Colin Sexton had all the makings of a superstar. He also happened to be the first player drafted in the post-LeBron era in Cleveland, and he hit the ground running. In his first 3 years, his improvement was staggering. His speed and creativity gave off the vibe of a young Dwayne Wade. However, he joined the Cavs at a horrible time. As I mentioned, they completely blew up the team after LeBron left, so all they had were a bunch of young guys who all wanted a piece of that pie, but with little guidance in the locker room. Sexton emerged as the best player of the group. Dude averaged over 24 a game in his 3rd year, but when it was time to negotiate a rookie extension to stay in Cleveland, the Cavs got cold feet. They weren't ready to commit a long-term deal and would much rather wait and see, let him hit restricted free agency and decide whether or not they want to keep him. Mostly, they were concerned if a Colin Sexton and Darius Garland backcourt could work. Garland was also very small, but a much better passer and a more natural point guard, whereas Sexton was an undersized combo guard who was still learning how to run the offense. Sadly, Sexton suffered a torn meniscus at the worst possible time. In his 4th year, his extension year, when he was supposed to solidify his spot in the organization. Instead, he saw his running mate Garland get his first ever All-Star nomination, and the Cavs had their first winning season since LeBron left. They did this all while Sexton was absent. It was a clear sign that they don't need him, and his time in Cleveland was coming to an end. Thus, he got packaged in a trade for Utah's Donovan Mitchell. Hilariously, they replaced an undersized shooting guard with another one. But unlike Sexton, Mitchell was a known commodity, a seasoned veteran and a perennial all-star. With his arrival to Utah, Sexton jumped from one rebuilding team to another, from the post-LeBron rebuild to the post-Gobert and Mitchell rebuild. So yet again, he played for a team whose entire future was tied up in draft picks, and they had no intention of winning. For Sexton, it sucked. I mean, this was a guy with an unmatched desire to win. That's what made him such a special prospect to begin with. Even as a teenager, he always knew winning was the ultimate goal, and anything short of that is a failure to him. We've got one goal, and that's to win and get to the playoffs. I know I was disappointed a little bit, but that doesn't take away from the teammates itself, so we're going to figure it out, and we're going to win basketball games together and have a good season. He was quite optimistic, and despite signing a 4-year deal with the Jazz, when the end of his contract was coming up, they once again dumped him for scraps. A 2nd-round pick and Yusuf Nurkic was all Utah got back in return. In hindsight, it was an atrocious deal, but it showed how little value he had because his skill set was replaceable and the market was dry. Upon getting traded to Charlotte though, it looks like he'll be stuck on another rebuilding team again. Lauri Markkanen. Speaking of playoff drought, it's been nearly a decade and Markkanen still has yet to make the playoffs. But in this case, Markkanen actually has been a net positive through his time in Utah. In his early years, however, his teams never fully trusted him to take control of the offense. On the Bulls, they didn't know what to do with him. He's a 7-footer with such a unique array of skills, but when you have so many different things you're good at, your team doesn't know how to maximize your talent, especially when there's other options there. Markkanen went from being a spot-up shooter to trying to post up more, getting put in pick and pops. Every aspect of his game was used in order to benefit other players on the team. He never had his own identity. The same thing happened in Cleveland, but when he came to Utah and made the jump into stardom, one would expect the Jazz to stop being mediocre and eventually be a good team for once. That has yet to happen. He actually arrived to Utah with Colin Sexton, and the two of them launched the start of a new era in Salt Lake City. The issue is, much of their assets from the Gobert and Mitchell trades were future draft picks that took many years to project. During this time, Markkanen became an all-star, but due to the very meticulous, cautious nature of the Jazz organization, they don't like to make big splashes in free agency. They prefer to wait and develop their young guys in-house, because that's what they've always done. In every era where they've experienced success, most of their guys were drafted and developed internally, so Markkanen was forced to be patient. This resulted him in being stuck on yet another rebuilding team, just like the rest of his career. He doesn't mind, of course, and he still has the ambition to win in the future, but it's very questionable how their young guys, their picks, will develop in the next few years. Markkanen certainly isn't getting any younger. Trey Murphy III. I could have easily put Zion Williamson here, because you could say Zion is the #1 cause for the Pelicans being stuck in rebuilding hell due to his injuries and absence. But the way his absence impacts his teammates is not frequently discussed. Among all his teammates, Trey Murphy has been with him for 5 years, tied with Herb Jones for being his longest tenured teammate. However, Murphy has well exceeded expectations and took over as the primary option when Zion isn't playing, which isn't quite often. He initially came in as just a 3-point sniper, but developed every aspect of his game to become one of the most well-rounded wings in the whole league.
And Trey going to the rack and got the line!
Murphy's mere existence presents a dilemma for the Pelicans because he's so good and so young that they don't want to blow it up and start over. If this team had horrible players outside of Zion, they would have given up already. But Murphy gives the team hope, so they keep trying year after year. It's gotten to the point where he's too good to give up, and his contract is even better. $28 million a year for a wing player who shoots this well, plays defense very well, and is a rapidly improving playmaker? Sign me up. That's a great freaking deal. Except the same logic that makes him a valuable asset is also the reason why the Pelicans don't want to trade him away. They'd rather wait and keep trying to build around him and Zion, cause maybe the injuries will stop happening and something will click, and they'll have a season where they both pop off at the same time. This has left Murphy in a weird situation where he's stuck, cause he's having the best years of his life, and a large part of that is because Zion has been injured. But the Pelicans simply aren't good enough or can consistently stay healthy enough to make a playoff push. If he wasn't this good, they would have let him go already, to perhaps a contender, cause he'd certainly be perfect for any contending team. So if there's any player stuck in an unforgivable rebuild, it's Trey Murphy. Anyway, that's all folks. Those were some players stuck in rebuilding hell for quite a long time. Some of whom were on different teams, some were stuck on a single team for their entire career. And they can't seem to help their team break the barrier and become something more than just a mediocre team. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Can you think of any other players who might fit the theme of this video? Do you see any of these guys finally breaking out of the endless cycle of rebuilding? Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.